Prohibition, Influencers of the Midwest, presented by Damian Dyer, Declan Burgett, Trevor Phelps, and Maddox Morrow. Carrie Nation was an iconic part of the Prohibition movement in Kansas, which lasted from the 1830s until 1948, long after the rest of the country ended its experiment with the Dry Crusade. During Prohibition, regular men, women, children, and reformers like Carrie Nation and Wayne Wheeler were involved and affected in Prohibition. At this time, men were consuming large amounts of alcohol, leading them to be drunk at work and creating poor home environments for their spouses and children. With these issues on the rise, the U.S. government outlawed drinking and all forms of alcohol. This is the start of Prohibition. According to the Advocate in News Volume, the disregard for prohibitory law is not a fact that the infraction of all law is practiced in proportion to the moral depravity of the lawbreaker and apathy of the other members of a community permitting such infraction. It is a just arrangement of law because of its being ignored by depraved nature, that its object is the suppression of evil, which it does not, when enforced, makes it just that in itself is sufficient. That the liquor traffic is a nefarious evil need not be argued, but it is the enormity of the hydra-headed monster that is appalling, and it can be conquered by nothing short of a Herculean efforts from a humanizing standpoint. The effects of alcohol, as laid down in standard psychologies, is along the line, but civil law, paralleling the great law of nature along the same line, is an indispensable auxiliary.
While the Prohibition movement was gaining momentum in Kansas, there were minimal efforts being made to diminish or eliminate the consumption of alcohol. To the northeast of Kansas, in Kansas City, Missouri, was the saloon-lined streets located at 9th and State Line, which became known as the wettest block in the world, where railway workers and laborers would cross from Kansas into Missouri to quench their thirst. The success of the wettest block was intertwined with the rise of Tom Pendergast, a charismatic and influential political boss. He built a network of corruption and patronage, controlling city politics and law enforcement. Under Pendergast's control, the block flourished and became a hub for not only alcohol, but other vices. The police turned a blind eye to the misconduct, since they were on his payroll, which ensured that the block would continue to operate without interference.
The 18th Amendment, which forbade the manufacture, sale, and importation of intoxicating liquors, was passed on December 17, 1917, with a vote of 282 to 128, with 137 Republicans and 141 Democrats voting for the new law. Prohibition would last into the early 1930s, but in Kansas, the Prohibition fight started much earlier and lasted much longer. Carrie Nation, probably the most famous reformer of the temperance movement, was born on November 26, 1846, in Jared County, Kentucky. She had very poor health when she was a child, and many people in her family had suffered from mental illnesses. Carrie Nation married Dr. Charles Gould, a physician who fought for the Union in the Civil War. In November of 1867, while she was pregnant with their daughter, the couple separated because of Lloyd's alcoholism and inability to support his family. Lloyd died from a disease a year later in 1869.
In 1877, Carrie married David Nation, and they eventually moved to Medicine Lodge, Kansas, where he was a minister and she ran a successful hotel. It was after she moved to Medicine Lodge that Mrs. Nation started her temperance work and founded a local chapter of the Women's Christian Temperance Union. She also founded a sewing circle in Medicine Lodge that provided clothing and food to the poor. Carrie Nation played an important part in the banning of alcohol. She went around to taverns and smashed everything with her hatchet, from windows and mirrors to kegs of beer and bottles of alcohol, all while she was singing hymns and praying. On June 5, 1900, Carrie Nation walked into a bar in Kiowa, Kansas, where, in her words, "I ran behind the bar, smashed the mirror and all the bottles under it, picked up the cash register, threw it down, then broke the faucets of the refrigerator, opened the door, and cut the rubber tubes that conducted the beer. I threw over the slot machine and got from it a sharp piece of iron with which I opened the bungs of the beer kegs and opened the faucets of the barrels. And then the beers flew in every direction and I was completely saturated."
The reaction in the nation was mixed. and she had great detractors and supporters. Carrie Nation's radical actions to bring awareness of Prohibition inspired many political cartoons and even a song sung by Steve Porter in 1901 titled Carrie Nation in Kansas. Here is an excerpt from that song.
Carrie Nation's all the rage in Kansas. Carrie Nation's all the rage in Kansas. Carrie Nation's all the rage, and she'll go on the stage, or they'll put her in a cage in Kansas. But they've made some awful cracks in Kansas. They've made some awful cracks in Kansas. They've made some awful cracks. Now I'm telling you the facts. Everybody has an axe in Kansas.
A front page editorial in the March 1st, 1901 edition of the Kansas Agitator said, "With all the humor of the situation, I do not hesitate to declare that Mrs. Nation today is the most dire menace which confronts the young century. She is nothing less than a startling social phenomenon, involving a stupendous psychological problem. The fact that Mrs. Nation not only thought, but acted, clothes the affair with dramatic situation, which is sure to impress hysterical and half-demented women everywhere, and perhaps cause an army of feminine warriors armed with battle-axes to rally to her standard. The saloon is the safety valve of plutocracy. Through it, the suppressed indignation, misery, and madness of the underclasses find vent in recreation, drunkenness, and revelry. Without this escape value, there would soon be a social revolution which would storm the citadels of wealth as once stormed by the Tuileries of France." The Women's Christian Temperance Union, or WCTU, was formed in 1874. After women in Hillsboro, Ohio, her Diocletian Lewis, also known as Dr. Dio Lewis, gave his temperance talks and stirred the women to organize peaceful protest. 40 years earlier, Lewis' own father was an alcoholic, and his mother had gone down to the local bar with other women, petitioning the bar to close. He encouraged the women in his audience to do the same thing. Lewis gave those speeches around the country, and the WCTU spread.
According to the Library of Congress, the WCTU gave the temperance movement its most forceful voice. The histories of the temperance movement and the women's movement were often linked, which explains why the WCTU originally proposed the ban of alcohol as a method for preventing abuse from alcoholic husbands. The WCTU spent many years building the movement through education and local and state laws, and in 1881 had a big success. Kansas included a ban on alcohol in their state of constitution. This made Kansas the first state to pass a statewide prohibition law, and it stayed in effect until 1948.
Another person who played an important role in Prohibition was Wayne Wheeler. He was born on November 10, 1869. Wayne Wheeler impacted Prohibition in ways no one could have imagined. The New York Herald Tribune even said, "Without Wayne B. Wheeler's generalship, it is more likely that we should have never had the 18th Amendment." Wayne Wheeler was an activist for Prohibition.
In 1893, Wayne Wheeler teamed up with Robert Russell and the Anti-Saloon League to work together to ban the consumption of alcohol and the production of alcoholic beverages. Their goal was to make laws in every state banning alcohol manufacturing and sale.
One of Wheeler's classmates described him as a locomotive in trousers. While clerking for a Cleveland lawyer and attending classes at Western Reserve Law School, Wheeler worked full-time for the League, riding his bicycle from town to town to speak to more churches and recruit more supporters. After he earned his law degree in 1898 and took over the Ohio ASL's legal office, Wheeler started numerous legal cases, speeches, and campaigns for the League.
Soon, Wheeler and the ASL had effective control of the Ohio legislature. They had opposed 70 sitting legislators of both parties. Now the state could pass a law that had long been the League's primary goal, a local option bill that would make power over the saloon directly in the voters' hands. Wheeler worked hard to make things happen, and he felt like it was his responsibility to abolish alcohol.
On December 5, 1933, the 18th Amendment was repealed, making alcohol legal in the United States. After that, people drank more responsibly. As of October 2024, there are still 80 dry counties in 9 different states. All people were affected by Prohibition. People like Carrie Nation and Wayne Wheeler helped change history.